want me to read anything during the presentation, I'll read it for you. All good? All right. Morning, guys. Morning. As y'all know, I'm Anthony. Work for Stafford Township. I'm not going to go too into detail about my career. Been there for 4 years. Get to do some cool stuff, community policing. Work here with Carl on midnights, and here now in MOI. I'm excited to be an instructor when this is all over. As you can see, I did a little unorthodox thing today using a flip chart. A guy from Manchester already stole my joke today, which is on how to make the world's best chocolate chip cookies. But we're in Ocean County, so we don't do that. But I one-upped them, and I did bring chocolate chip cookies for you guys. My presentation's over. So, don't mind this sign. You guys can free to do whatever you want. Alright, so, fortunately, I'm actually talking about a really important subject, which is law enforcement suicide. So, something very prevalent in what we deal with today. I don't want to jump the gun here, but I will a little bit. How often do we train for firearms? 2 times a year, right? DT, we're trying to get that implemented. There's a lot of things that we're required to do. Is anybody required to have a mental health check? No, right? What's the extent of our mental health awareness that we have one day in the academy, right? We talked about it. Beach Haven guy mentioned we had the guy from St. Barnabas come in, and it pretty much tells you what to look for, and if you're experiencing these symptoms, contact somebody. You're with that somebody. But anyways, that's what we're looking at today. So we're going to go a little unorthodox, and we're going to go through something that's kind of personal to me, and I'm going to go through the list here of guys. You guys are going to see how it's all going to tie together into our mental health awareness theme of my presentation. So these guys all worked in the Essex County Police Department in the 1980s. And unfortunately, they all suffered something pretty tragic, so I'm going to go through. Patrolman Joe Pochio did a motor vehicle stop in the Branchbrook Park in Newark, which is known for its beautiful cherry blossoms and inordinate amount of murders and drug deals. He pulled over a car. It was a stolen vehicle, approached it, and was fatally shot and killed by the driver of that car. Patrolman Danny Smith, also Essex County PD, pulls over a car just for a minor motor vehicle infraction and did not know it was stolen, as dispatch didn't have the quick technology that we have today. It was just recently stolen and used in a strong arm robbery with a shotgun. Unfortunately, as he approached the car, he was shot and killed by a 17-year-old male. Patrolman Keith Newman, on the job for 2 years. He was recently married 2 weeks prior to this incident. He just got on the SWAT team as the guys were stacking up. The guy behind him broke one of the cardinal firearms rules by having his finger on the trigger when he was not ready, willing, and able to destroy what was behind that barrel, and he actually died by friendly fire. Paul Lefchek, Keith Newman's partner. 2 weeks after Keith Newman was killed incidentally, his wife came home and found him dead, self-inflicted gunshot. Detective George Bello, Jerry Del Sordo, they're looking for a 14-year-old male who escaped from the Essex County Juvenile Detention Center. Supposedly this male had a connection with a white Nissan 280ZX, so you can tell how dated that is. I think we're on 370s now. Pretty sweet. Wish I could afford one. They approached the wrong white 280ZX, and they were in the middle of a drug kind of war, gang turf war, and they both were shot. 4 guys in the car were armed and shot them. Patrolman Michael Mangione couldn't deal with all this the way he wanted to. He resorted to an alcohol abuse addiction, and he ultimately drank himself to death right after this. I know this is really warm and fuzzy stuff. Sergeant Ralph Offsnott, also 1980s, he died in a diving accident. He was actually just helping out Essex County Parks and Recreation, like replacing a screen at the bottom of the Week Wake Park to make the water cleaner, something for the kids to swim. So, you're probably wondering why the hell I'm talking about Essex County Police Department in the 1980s. It has nothing to do with mental health, but it kind of does, because I grew up with somebody who worked with all these guys. So my dad worked with all these guys. He had personal relationships with pretty much every single one on this list besides Joe Boccio, but he kind of grew up knowing him. He was like a neighborhood cop, kind of like Officer Fritz was to me growing up. Danny Smith, when he went to the academy with, so kind of like me and Carl's relationship. Keith Newman, my dad was his FTO, so he was actually in his wedding. Paul Lefchak, he was very good friends with him and his wife. My dad was working the night this shooting happened, so he went on the manhunt. Michael Mangione was super close with my family. Would set up my family's stereo, radio systems, and he actually worked with my dad off duty. And Sergeant Ralph Falchnut was one of my dad's first sergeants. So I grew up with a law enforcement officer who went through the guilt, went through the grief, and went through serious bouts of PTSD. I had a great childhood, and he didn't put it all on me, but I noticed there was times where he was extremely sad. There was times where a siren went off, he kind of just froze up and didn't really talk. And I actually talked to him this weekend. We had dinner together. It's okay, do you mind if I use some of your experiences? And he said there's nothing better than mental health awareness for a law enforcement officer, so it's kind of cool. I drew this topic. Back then, if you died as a result of suicide, you didn't have like a big fancy funeral like you do nowadays. You kind of remembered for the way you went out rather than the life you lived or the legacy you lived. That's changed now because the first funeral I went to as a Stafford officer was up in Monmouth County, and I got to see a full-fledged funeral for an officer that took his own life. He's more remembered for the good things he did. So, that being said, my dad's career also kind of deteriorated through that. He developed heart problems. Obviously, when we're going through that much, that's just the officers at that. By the way, they're a 50-man department. All right, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 guys at a 50-man department. Right, it's a pretty big impact. After the last guy, they actually hired 70 new officers to kind of combat what they were going through. And he said the highest level of mental health help that they had at that time was, his partner died, and he would come back to the station and said, "Oh, tomorrow you gotta go to stress awareness class, 10 hours. He went to the class, it was 30 minutes long. The guy said, "Listen, can you still do the job, still carry a bag and gun?" He's like, "I guess I gotta sign some papers, because now I'm gonna lose my job, lose my pension, lose everything." So it never really helped him. So that's kind of my personal take on this. Now I have a question for you guys. Raise your hand if you think it's true that suicide is the #1 killer of law enforcement officers. #1. Raise your hand if you think that's false. Okay. So a lot of you guys are undecided, right? Here's a chart from police1.com, which is line of duty deaths versus suicide. Obviously all for officers. 2008, 141 suicides compared to 163 line of duty deaths. 2009, 143 to 145. Suicides obviously blue there. You can't see the chart in the back. 126 to 141. And 2012, 2016, 108 to 162. And 17, we have 140 to 139. Does anybody want to change their answer, true or false? Is suicide the #1 killer of police officers? Anybody? You guys awake? All right. So line of duty deaths, what does that entail? We have 9/11 related illnesses. We have car accidents. We have gunfire. We have accidental discharges. We have falling. We have heart attacks on the job, right? That happens. Actually, the second leading cause, 2018, was gunfire. I think it was 48. And right after that's car accidents. So suicide actually kills more cops every single year than anything we do on duty. But we don't really get trained for our mental health awareness, right? So we're going to look over a couple more stats. If I'm not driving home enough that our job is super stressful and health routine. That's why you need PowerPoint. Stats. 35% of law enforcement officers experience PTSD compared to the 6.8% in the general population. That's a heck of a lot more, right? 31% of officers experience depression compared to 6.7% of the general population. Again, extremely large number. And this is at some point in your career. I'm not saying it's chronic depression or anything, just a period of time. 11% of police suicide victims were former military veterans. Obviously, they have their years in the military, compounded with a lot of incidents they went through there. You come back home and we're dealing with more shit, right? So, here's a question. If I want to be an officer in Lakewood, what process would I have to go through? What kind of testing?
Our civil service test is first with a written test.
Written test?
Yeah, physical test.
Physical?
And interview background.
Interview background? Is there a psych in that? Psych exam?
Yeah, psych exam.
Who's Chiefstown? Chiefstown, how's yours go?
Starts with physical,
Physical?
then written,
Written?
and then background check and interview,
Background check?
and then psych
Psych.
test.
So if you don't pass the psych, you can't become a police officer, right? Is that right? I have to pass that Ohio exam, 800 something questions, right? You talk to usually a little shrink guy with the glasses and signs you off, and you like go home worried if you pass or not, and then you get a random call from your chief that you did, obviously, if you're in this room, right? So everybody here, everybody, at least in America that I know of, has to pass a psych exam to become a law enforcement officer. So why is it that we experience more PTSD and depression and suicide than the general population? We all meet the baseline of normal mental health, right? We're all cleared of any mental illnesses. There's only really one thing that distincts us from the general population, and that is the amount of critical incidents we see daily, right? General population, they have to deal with some of the same stuff we do, which is marital strife, which thank God I don't have yet, divorce, college debt, all the regular things you go through, right? Worrying about looking good, your health. But what do we see? I mean, these are just some of them. I'm sure you guys can name a million. I know one of the big ones for me, whether I like to admit it or not, are the heroin overdoses. My first day off FTO, 7 a.m., I got to the station, 7:05, the call was to my next door neighbor's house, 26-year-old kid that I've kind of grown up knowing, and I was doing CPR where all his parents were yelling at me. My neighbor died right next to me. One of the things of working in town that you grow up in, you know a lot of people that you deal with. One of the ones we recently had, I was another heroin overdose kid I played football with. I'm doing CPR and I'm looking at our picture playing football together, 10 years ago in high school. So a lot of these things do affect us. Bad car accidents, I'm sure everyone's seen one of those. I remember one time I was sexually assaulted a little girl. That was really hard to go home that day and not want to go drive up to where they arrested the guy up north. There's a lot of things, and we make jokes about decaying corpses. We're all joking about like 400-pound dead bodies, half eaten by maggots, but it's not normal for the human body to see these critical incidents day in and day out, right? It's just not normal. We don't go to houses if the dad gets a promotion, mom's cooking the Betty Crocker meal, Susie got A's on her test, and the young kid just won the state championship in wrestling. We go to the house if dad got fired, mom's hitting crack again, Susie got raped, and we're dealing with shit day in and day out, right? So that contributes to it. Some of the common things we see among police suicide victims: there's chronic stress, depression, anxiety, anger, intense irritability, aggression, alcohol abuse, drug use, hopelessness, isolation, suicidal ideations, and PTSD. This time you guys know what PTSD is. Depression, it affects the way you think, the way you act, and the decisions you make. In 91% of police suicides, alcohol abuse was prevalent. So that's a really big thing. Just like my dad's friend, Michael Mangione. I kind of wondered why my dad hated when I even had one beer throughout life, and I haven't seen my dad drunk until actually last year on vacation. So now I know why. here's the thing that needs to be worked on. Like I said in the beginning of my presentation, there's no mandatory mental health checks, no mandatory mental health training. You know, I work in a great department. You know, we have state-of-the-art training all the time, but the last time I remember getting trained mental health wise besides CIT, which has helped other people going through mental health things, is the academy. I actually called our chaplain this weekend to see what his take was on suicide, and if you're like pressed for time and you have something to do on a Saturday night, do not call your chaplain, because I could not get off the phone. I was like, I gotta go, Matt, because actually I beat in 70 in the parking lot. He's trained, he went to 6 different week-long courses to help officers deal with depression and anxiety, PTSD, and suicide. The biggest thing he stressed to me was that if I were to approach him, that everything I say is in confidence, unless I have a gun to my head. He's obviously going to have to tell somebody. Everything I say is in confidence, and if I feel that I need a couple weeks off from the job, he would go with me to the PBA president to make sure I'm not going to, you know, be without pay for that period of time that I need to get myself and, you know, bring me to the right doctors, everything like that. So your chaplain is a great resource if any of us experience these things. 1-800-COP-to-COP was started actually in New Jersey in 1998 after a slew of police suicides in New Jersey that they kind of went throughout the whole state. UMDNJ, partner with Rutgers now, you can call them 24/7 and you will get a cop on the line, or at the very minimum, a psychologist that is trained to deal with police officers. And it's not just for suicide, it's not just for depression, anxiety, PTSD. If you're going through marital problems, if you're going through debt, they will help you. Same thing with Text Blue. Now they text you back and forth, I guess, to help with millennials like myself. And one of the coolest things I saw was Badge of Life. They're a nonprofit organization. They have this system called Top Down. So we kind of vary across ages and places in our careers. But I know me being still the most junior guy in staff, are probably not going to go, you know, try to implement this mental health program. And this Top Down, the program, the way it's set up is the chief is the first one to go see a mental health counselor, and he kind of brings in the captains, lieutenants. They all have to go see one. The sergeants do it, the patrolmen see it. And everybody develops a rapport with this mental health counselor, and just has an ongoing relationship with them, and it's mandatory mental health checks every year, just to make sure you're okay where you are in, you know, in your career, or just debriefs. You know, it teaches sergeants how to debrief after a tragic incident. You know, I've had sergeants bring me together, bring the squad together kind of after something, which was some of my best times. One of the biggest things I remember was that first day when I did CPR on my neighbor, and he passed away. My sergeant took me in his car for 3 hours and bought me lunch. Said, this is kind of part of the job, this is what you're going to have to see. And we kind of have to break that stigma, man. Like, we all pretend to be tough guys, and we kind of have to with our job, you know. I mean, unless you're on body cam, you can't really say moron, I guess. But we have to be able to talk to each other. I have to be able to call Carl and be like, dude, that really messed me up last night. You know, what do you think about it? One of the things my dad said was he didn't go out drinking after Michael Mangione didn't debrief with the guys anymore, and he wishes he stayed in touch with his peers more. But now, he's kind of switched the whole, you know, turned a whole new leaf, and he actually meets with guys from the Essex County in the 80s every single month at that really good deli in Lacey, whatever it's called, I'm forgetting the name of it right now, Lacey Road. They get breakfast one Sunday every month. So being with your peers and debriefing is huge for mental health. I have a poem for you guys I'm going to hand out. It's actually really cool to read through at the end. It's called Policeman's Fight. It's written by this guy, Richard White. He's been working in the Houston area as a police officer for 10 years, and he won some poem contest, so I thought it was pretty cool. Basically, in summary, guys, mental health and suicide awareness is huge for our profession. It is the #1 killer of law enforcement officers every single year. Obviously, the causes of it are the critical incidents that we see day in and day out. It's not, your body is not meant for that. And some ways that we could take care of it, talk to our chaplain, have good peer support groups, hopefully implement a system in our department to take care of it and have mental health checks. Anybody have any questions? All good? Thanks, guys.